Welcome to the FNO InsureTech Podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsureTech. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world, welcome to this week's edition of FNO InsureTech, the most interesting podcast ever produced in the world. And you're listening to it today. And if you believe that, I have a bridge for sale in Brooklyn. Speaking of Brooklyn, are you a basketball fan, David?
I follow basketball, yes.
So then you know what just happened in basketball this week.
Yes, huge win for the city of New York, the New York Knicks, taking home the
Knicks
NBA championship.
That's right. There was a lot of excitement in New York. And both of my sons live there and they're partying their brains out. Even though they're not Knicks fans, they're just partying their brains out because it's a good reason to do that. And I think that's pretty much what everybody in New York is doing right now.
It most likely is. You know, we were in New York 2 weeks ago for game one. We were in town when game one happened. We didn't want to disrupt. We didn't want any of the focus to be pulled away from the game. So Lee and I didn't go. We wanted the focus to be on basketball and not on us. So we sat that one out. But we were in the city when that happened. There was a palpable excitement in the air.
About why you were in New York City. Was that cool? Was it fun? Did you have a good time? Why were you there?
We did. We were there for the InsureTech Insights convention. We met and talked and chatted and saw lots of interesting tech, lots of AI. And it will be interesting to see sort of the overlying theme. We've all been talking about AI and we've all been sort of theorizing about AI and what is it going to do and how is it going to change things. And now we're really starting to move into this time of implementing. And is it really going to do what thought it was going to do? How is it really going to impact the insurance industry? The next 12 to 18 months are going to be pretty interesting when it comes to the implementation of all these ideas that all these real smart people that are way smarter than I am have in motion. Very productive conference.
A very interesting guest today, as you know. In fact, two things I want to say. First of all, Lee Boyd is not here today because I think he's relaxing, isn't he?
I hope so. He deserves it.
Does he? Does he really? We'll have to talk about that. Be careful, you work for him. So, then I'll say it. Yeah, he's relaxing. And so our newest and only other co-host, David Prejeant, is here manning the co-host mic. And we have a great guest today. We have a company that's been on, parts and pieces of this company has been on, including the company has been on. We have Nearmap with us today. The Chief Insurance Officer at Nearmap, Chris Touchton, has joined us to talk about what's going on at Nearmap and especially why in the world would Nearmap, an aerial imagery company, buy ITEL, the product identification company that we all know so well.
And Chris touches on this a little bit. He was the president of ITEL for 22 years, which myself being in the claims industry for the time that I spent there and the time that I continue to spend there, ITEL is a staple. Everyone who's going to spend any time in claims knows ITEL. So really interesting to have a chat with him who's been embedded in such a staple of the industry for so long.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have him. And for those of you who, in particular, who work on the claims side of things, you'll find this very interesting, but as will anybody who's in underwriting who probably knows Nearmap from that area. So we'll get to it. But first we have to say, congratulations, New York Knickerbockers, their proper name. And without further ado, let's get to our interview with Chris Touchton, Chief Insurance Officer at Nearmap. Hey everybody, we are here with our special guest. You are a first timer on our podcast. Your company, this is not the first time your company has been on the podcast. We have Chris Touchton, Chief Insurance Officer at Nearmap, with us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Where are you coming from today?
I am in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where ITEL's corporate headquarters was before the merger with Nearmap. And
Where is the United States headquarters of Nearmap?
So it's kind of, I guess that there's not an official United States headquarters. We have quite a few cities with a few people in it, including Denver and Salt Lake and Jacksonville and DC. So it's pretty spread out, but we actually do have more employees in the United States now than Australia.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, this is a bigger market. So more to do.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Nearmap has evolved quite a bit since we last had you guys on, which I believe was 2021. And there was a pandemic in 2021, in case you guys never heard about that. And, but you guys have really evolved and changed a lot. So can you go back a couple of years? Because I know that even you yourself are a bolt-on from an acquisition. So give us a little history on Nearmap, what you guys do, and how things have developed in the last few years.
Sure, happy to do that. So Nearmap in general is a property intelligence company. And the idea is, let's see how much information we can gather about individual properties to help specifically in the insurance market, whether it be in underwriting or now in claims. And that's part of the story that is a part of this evolution you're talking about. So when you talk to Nearmap, Nearmap started with a really cool camera that was combing Australia and New Zealand to take pictures so that insurance companies could write better insurance policies. So they knew more about the property, so they could literally look at it and then say, okay, there's these additional structures, there's a swimming pool, there's all this information that someone could glean from physically looking at it. And then there were other markets that needed aerial imagery as well. So there are certain commercial environments that like to kind of take a look at their properties and see if anything's changed on a property. Certainly there are government reasons that you might want to look at your property. So there's a lot of different use cases outside of insurance as well, but insurance underwriting was the primary market for Nearmap in the beginning. After that, they realized a couple of things. Number one, there was the opportunity to use AI and kind of a decision layer underneath that data. So if you take a picture, what is a human doing when they look at that? And can we automate some of that using AI and other decision technologies? And that's where the acquisition of Betterview came into play. Betterview had this, they were partners before they became a part of Nearmap, and they had this kind of decision AI layer that was using and able to use the Nearmap imaging data and really help the underwriters along to say, hey, this is a little bit more about your property other than just looking at it. We can glean certain risk profiles based on what we're looking at on given pictures. And so that's where the Betterview acquisition kind of came in, which is really just helping improve the decisioning process and the underwriting process and not leaving it all up to humans to figure that out. And then once you categorize your claims, then you can figure out how to treat, or not claims, but your underwriting opportunities. You can triage it and put it in the right process inside the building.
The Betterview acquisition made the product more robust.
That's right. Yes, it was more automated, more robust, smarter, all of those kind of things. And that was the reason for that. There was starting to become a use case on the claim side, which we can kind of get into. So the next step was the ITEL acquisition, which was almost exactly a year ago at this point. And that was their real earnest effort to get into the claims area and not just stay on underwriting. I mentioned before that they do have some products and use cases on the claim side. Most specifically, they do comb areas after a CAT event, and then you can get before and after pictures of your particular property, which really helps triage in a CAT scenario. But that was almost exclusively the limitation of the product suite in the claims side before the ITEL acquisition. So the ITEL acquisition was about establishing a beachhead, so to speak, in the claims area, because ITEL has been around for over 20 years and has been working with generally all of the major property insurance companies on a claims basis. And the idea of having more information about the property from the inside, the materials, what the roof is, what all of the inside building materials are, and all of the historical data that ITEL has. I mean, ITEL has the most robust building material data source in the world, right? So when you're thinking about an overarching property intelligence strategy, you're looking at aerial imagery, you're looking at the underlying AI to figure out what that means. But when you pair that with what's actually in homes all throughout the country with millions of claims under our belts, and all of that robust material and product information, it really helped give a full underwriting and claims kind of solution, kind of one-stop shop to make sure that we're consistently looking at our data pre-loss and post-loss, make sure that we're not purchasing data, carriers aren't purchasing data twice. There's like this, what we're hoping to be this first of a kind and first ever bridge between underwriting and claims for the full breadth of property intelligence.
So as a claims guy, of which both David and I are claims people, and I mean, ITEL is this pinnacle company, right? That, I mean, there's no one like it. If you want to know what the flooring was, you got yourself a little sample of it and you sent it to you guys. I mean, in the old days anyways.
Yeah.
And that's how, and you did identification, and there was no other company like it. I still, as far as I know, there's no other company like it. Your moat is remarkable. And I don't fully, though, understand and am really curious about the strategic thinking behind combining that with the aerial. I mean, I guess it creates a fuller, more complete picture, like you're saying, of the property.
Yes, it's about the data. Yeah, one important evolution in the ITEL, on the ITEL side that I think will help answer your question is, over the years, we had already evolved the product once, taking it from a full mail-in service to the use of an app. So now you can take, instead of sending it on UPS, although plenty of people still send it via UPS, by the way, old habits die hard. A lot of people just prefer it that way. But we do have an app where you can take photographs of the products and send it in. And the same people that are doing it, the same process, the same underlying data, you're just taking measurements from photographs instead of actually measuring the physical sample. But so that was kind of the first evolution of the ITEL process. The next evolution was realizing that there are certain building materials and certain claim scenarios where there's literally not the ability to either use our app or send in a sample. Either you're writing a check the first time, you're not sending anyone on site because more and more, as you guys know, desk adjustments are happening. And so we looked back 5-6 years ago and said, all right, what can we do here to help the industry when there's not time to use one of our traditional services, and evolve the product to be a data solution. We said, hey, we actually have building material data at the zip code level for all of these products. And so why don't we supplement the claim process? When you don't have time, you can at least use the ITEL data and you can settle all claims, whether you use the lab in Jacksonville or whether you use Xactimate or Cotality to select a grade, you can still be using the underlying ITEL data. So there's a consistency in claim settlement. So we started a data integration with Verisk and Cotality in roughly 2001. And now our data is being used when there's not time to use the lab, or when there is time to use the lab, they either use the app or send in a sample. So to answer your question, we now have literally millions of data points about what the properties look like at the zip code level all around the country. And that is a really valuable data asset for Nearmap to say, all right, well, we know what it looks like. If we can learn more on a broad basis about what's actually inside these homes, we can start building better underwriting models. We can start improving the speed to get claims closed because we know more about the property before the adjuster even shows up, just based on trending and other information. Or maybe we even have a claim from this property in the past that we can pull data from. So that's the idea, is when you think about property intelligence, it's what it looks like on the outside, and it's actually what's actually inside the building. And even if we don't know something about the specific properties, there are certainly things we can glean at the zip code and regional level when you're combining all of that information together, especially using an AI layer underneath.
Awesome. Chris, when you start to connect the dots, I'll say, in Nearmap and ITEL and these other products that you guys have rolled up over the years, what are some things that maybe you said, hey, I think we think we're going to use this data this way. But then when you got in there and you got under the hood, you went, oh, wait, we didn't think about this, but this would be really cool too. Was there anything that I don't want to say caught you off guard, but that you guys kind of took a step back and went, oh, you know what? This would be really awesome and useful if we did this too.
I wouldn't say anything really caught us off guard per se. I do think that it was each evolution of the business was a little bit scary. Just because, going from, at least at the ITEL level, evolving the business in the middle where you think you have it built one way and then you have to pivot to an app or then pivot from an app to data is always a scary proposition because you're not completely sure that the market is either ready timing wise or will appreciate what it is that you're trying to evolve to. So there's some scariness and unknowns in that, at least from the ITEL side. But the interesting thing about it is that the claim process evolved so much and so quickly. I mean, you mentioned COVID before. Once we all started being here instead of in the office, it really opened the floodgates for all of these technologies and all of these new data ideas and AI in general to start, even if it hasn't fully realized where it's going to go in the claims and underwriting process, it really started to explode during that time. So I think our timing was good in that we realized that the industry was evolving to be more data and technology. And we were in a really good position to kind of ride that wave and be one of the first people that had a name in the industry that were bringing these data solutions to the table versus just somebody in their garage that is inventing something because they didn't have anything else to do during COVID. So so if anything caught me off guard, it's how this slow, stodgy claims industry dealt with the reality of COVID and really just exploded in terms of innovation and open-mindedness and willing to take risk and all of those kind of things. And I think we wouldn't be where we are ITEL wouldn't have been where we are and in a really good position to be partners with Nearmap had we not kind of leaned into that evolution.
Do you think that connecting all these data sources is going to give, one of the things that you, being a claims guy, like Rob mentioned, we deal with inconsistencies, right, in claims. Do we feel like all this data coming together is going to help us get consistent, help us get at least a little bit more consistent than we were before?
I mean, that's the goal. I mean, we all know from a claims perspective, there's always been like this trade-off of speed versus, call it accuracy / consistency, right? And so, the faster you go, the less time there is to do all of these things that you need to do, whether it's take a site visit, whether it's bring in a third-party expert, an engineer, or whatever it is. There's this trade-off that you've always had to make. And you guys have been in the industry long enough to know that the pendulum swings back and forth. 1 or 2 years, everybody's like, oh, we got to go faster. Policyholders are happier when they get checks faster. It doesn't really matter what kind of accuracy and consistency we're sacrificing. We got to get checks in hands faster. Then they're like, oh, wait a minute, we're paying way too much and we're going to have to increase our premium so much that we need to really pay attention to accuracy and consistency. We need to not worry about getting claims closed so fast. And so that compromise was just constant, right? One way or the other. I think what is emerging and where we're going as an industry is when you're settling on the desk, when you're trying to get those claims closed in 3, 5, 10 days, the data is going to allow you to be able to make that decision more consistently, which in a lot of ways leads to accuracy. But there are certainly ways, the less variation there is between one adjuster's judgment and another adjuster's judgment, if you can use underlying data to make that consistent, then we can let the adjusters actually make the determinations that are not just about their experience and more just about what they're observing on the claim and kind of leading it to its conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of gives me a follow-up in that, if there's a point where we can point to a third party, an ITEL, a Nearmap, and say, hey, I'm the adjuster, but this is what I think, but this is also what Nearmap thinks. This is also what ITEL thinks. Do you think that consistency will fold into the revolving door of the adjuster versus the contractor versus, that battle that's gone on for centuries, right? Do you think that
it'll play a role in that as well?
Absolutely. And that's been a big part of what we have tried to do over the last few years, which is to let the industry know that we don't care what the outcome is. We don't care if it's repairable or not. We don't care. I mean, we do care, but we don't, it doesn't impact us. We don't get paid any more or less depending on the outcome, right? So we've tried to maintain this independent Switzerland-like posture whenever we're doing repair versus replace assessments, whenever we're setting the price of a building material. I mean, you can extend it to our newest product. Now we're doing an aerial measurements, walls, windows, roofs, and same thing. Doesn't matter what size the home is to us. The measurements are the measurements, right? So I think that's really important that not only do the insurance companies know that ITEL has their back and that we're making sure ITEL and Nearmap have their back and are making sure that each claim is settled as accurately as possible. The roofers and the general contractors and the water mitigation firms and the flooring retailers all need to know that we're also getting their back, because adjusters oftentimes select grades in their estimating systems that are too low. Oftentimes they say things should be repairable when they shouldn't be repairable, and it needs to be a full replacement. And somebody needs to stand up and bridge that gap. You mentioned that, yes, it's been a problem for many, many years, especially with the roofers, but certainly with all of those other constituents I mentioned as well. That causes so much static. It's the distrust that has formed between adjusters and kind of the contractors out there. We believe there's a way to get rid of many of those disputes, many of those lawsuits, many of those supplements, because the smoother the process goes, really, the better it is for everybody. And so having an independent party stand up and say, we will take both sides of this and look at it objectively, I think it can and will help.
As a former adjuster that lived in that tension between contractor and adjuster, having an area where we can have somebody help us get where we need to be is very beneficial.
Yeah. And to your point, it actually, just to put a pin in that one and we can move to the next one. I think not only does it help having an independent third party look at it, not only does it help both sides come to an agreement, it also helps the policyholder feel like they've been made whole. And, if it's an outcome that they're not in love with, if it can be repaired, I mean, nobody wants their kitchen repaired or their roof repaired if the option is a full replacement. But the truth is, some things can and should be repaired, which is what the policy states. And the more that insurers can repair, the better off we all are in terms of premiums and maintaining where they are instead of continuing. Insurance carriers can't afford to go buy every roof in America, right? We have to find some sort of compromise so that we can all afford property insurance. So I think getting those outcomes that aren't great from a policyholder's perspective come from a third party can help with net promoter scores. It can help with customer satisfaction, all those kind of things.
So you're a chief insurance officer. We don't see that at every company. Explain to us, give us a second on what's your job at Nearmap?
Yeah, so that is a great question, and the answer is still evolving to a degree. Up until a couple of months ago, I was the president of the ITEL business, and so now I'm on the executive leadership team of Nearmap, and have been over the last year kind of taking care to make sure that we move the ITEL business and all of the employees and business lines to the right place in the Nearmap organization. So that's been my primary job since last summer, is to kind of manage the integration of the businesses together from an executive perspective. We've now done that, and happy to say that we found the right area for each of the ITEL business units, and now we're fully integrated into the Nearmap organization. The ITEL name is still a brand in the claims side of the house for Nearmap. So the ITEL name isn't going away. It is all of the traditional products that you know of from ITEL are still going to be ITEL products as a part of the Nearmap organization. They're going to be branded ITEL. But the idea of the chief insurance officer is sort of this liaison, particularly on the claims, but helping, because of my experience on the claims side, but helping bridge that gap and kind of diving into the underwriting side to figure out how can we work with our customers? How do we get in front of the executive leaders at the insurance companies and say, what is it that you're looking for from a data perspective and a consistency perspective between underwriting and claims? certainly our customers are already doing a lot of work on that side. They're trying to figure out what does it look like? And you guys know they've tried many, many times over the years to bridge that gap unsuccessfully. But I think now that AI is emerging, and particularly agentic AI, where you need access to all of this data, and there's so much data on both sides, the insurance companies are forced to say, wait a minute, we need to go figure out where our data sources are. We need to figure out, are we buying these data sources or are they internal? What systems are producing them and how do we manage them? And then, oh, by the way, we need to go talk to the people on the other side of the fence in underwriting our claims and say, all right, do you have the same data? And how do we best work this out so that we can create this data lake and we can be AI ready, as they say, to do whatever it is they're going to do in the future on claims or underwriting. So it's just making sure they had plenty of underwriting experience. Now, my main job is to kind of navigate where we are from a company and strategic perspective on the claims and underwriting bridge.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because many of your customers know ITEL, completely. It's been a cornerstone provider of information for years. And so that must be a challenge for you to bring a new mix to market. I would find that, as somebody who did the marketing, daunting, right? To not spoil what you have. Like, I'm not surprised at all that you guys are continuing the ITEL name. It has so much equity. I think would have been a mistake to not do that. But to say, well, we're actually more than that. And with the customers that we deal with, getting them to be comfortable with that is a huge job, just full stop, right there.
Sure.
But get them to be willing to use and have an appetite for your other products. Talk to us about that challenge.
Yeah, so I think one thing that really helped with all of this is that our customers were generally already familiar with Nearmap and Betterview, just because they had been, as I mentioned, partially in the claims area. They are a larger company than ITEL is, so they've definitely been in the underwriting space and are one of the leading data providers on the underwriting space. So it was a familiar name for at least most of the people in claims, even if they didn't work directly with them for very long. So this idea of saying, hey, we've got this great work that we're doing over here on the Nearmap brain, and we have this great work that ITEL is doing, and here's the vision that we're trying to come to together, including actually getting executive leadership from underwriting and claims in the same room together and explaining the vision in front of them and saying, hey, is this where you'd like us to go? Does this make sense? And kind of have that dialogue. It made it really easy to kind of show the vision and get buy-in from our customers on where we were heading. So it isn't like they're losing anything when we didn't let anyone go from the ITIL organization. So the entire 300 plus per-person firm is still there, ready, willing, and able to help everything. Now we're just expanding our product suites to help from both the claims and underwriting side. So there's really no downside to our customers. We're just, and if anything, it's a good way for the industry to know that the Australian-based company is really means business in the United States and Canada, just because they've made these last two acquisitions here. So this is, like you said, this is the primary market in the world, and so it makes a lot of sense. This is where most of the claims are. So let's really lean in here.
You must be greatly challenged by the times that we're in. I mean, they're exciting. You mentioned the desk. David has been running desk units at Alacrity for a long time. Things are moving more in that direction because of technologies like what we're talking about today that are enabling things to not only go faster, but maybe even be more accurate than they have previously been. And on top of that, another layer to that is there's lots of products out there. There's lots of AI out there. There's lots of, our AI is better than their AI. What's it like now being one of the products in a whole sea of InsureTech AI-driven products that are out there? I mean, obviously your product is AI ready, right? I mean, it's perfect for AI. And so just talk about that landscape.
Sure. I mean, yes, a lot of other products and ideas have definitely emerged. It's a different landscape than it, 10 years ago when there were maybe 10 or 15 companies that basically did everything in the industry. Now there's maybe 50, right? So it's definitely been a lot. I would say a couple of things is really the relationship that both Nearmap and ITEL have with our customers really starts this conversation with our customers. It says, hey, we've got all of these things happening out there. Can we work with you guys? Or whether it's us or any of their other handful of major partners, can we work with you guys? Because we don't have the vendor management team to work with these 15, 20 other vendors that are calling us every day, nor are they security checked and background checked and, all of that stuff, right? So part of it, by the way, I think what you're going to see in the near future, you're already seeing it, by the way, is kind of a roll-up strategy of the large brands and companies and trusted names in the companies going and buying some of these technologies to supplement it, similar to what Nearmap did with Betterview, right? So there's more and more of that happening. And so it's incumbent upon all of us that are already working with the carriers to either go and acquire those solutions or to innovate on our own with our customers to continue to be that source of joint and co-innovation with our customers so we can keep that primary position. And by the way, if we don't do a good enough job, if we're not able to continue to innovate and be that, then we don't deserve, neither does Alacrity, neither do any of the stalwarts of the industry. We don't deserve to retain that position. So I personally run this business with the executive leadership team kind of paranoid. Like, we always should be looking over our shoulders and saying, what is somebody else doing and how are we going to respond and get ahead of it and do it faster? Because certainly we have the resources to do it, better and faster than some, startup company on the side.
Well, I just want to say this about ITEL. I don't know that it's accurate for me to say this, but I don't know that you had a competitor, certainly not a significant one for a long time. And that moat, because of how vast your database is and vast the requirements are, it was just a big moat that surrounded the company. But even with that, I just want to say that I never heard a bad word about ITEL, right? I've worked with many technology companies in our business, and there's a lot of bad that you could hear about them if you went out and looked for it. But it was never that way with ITEL. You guys were seemingly very well run, and it wasn't like take it or leave it, like can happen when you have a moat like that. It's our way or the highway. But I don't think that was the culture that you guys had.
I appreciate you saying that. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart, which is I agree that regardless of the size of your moat, you should be a customer-led organization. And so I wish it was the case that nobody said anything bad against us. We mess up, right? We do things that aren't right. We have humans involved and we do mess up. But one thing that's been a really important tenet to our business is when we mess up, we admit it and we talk about how we're going to fix it, and we commit not to do it again and not try to get defensive and pretend like it's not a problem, so that when we actually do the right thing, we can defend it, that we'll have people that trust us to have done the right thing when we did and to admit it when we haven't done the right thing.
I think that's going to be even more important as we venture into this AI world, that trust, that customer built trust, and that trust in outcomes and that trust in determinations. And we're going to have to do a lot of, I think there's going to be a lot of, hey, we got this wrong, but we're going to do it better. We're going to do it better next time. So I think that transparency is going to be super important as we move forward. And moving forward, Nearmap and ITEL and all you guys over there have new partnerships that you guys have been working on. I was reading about a partnership with FEMA that you guys recently had been talking about with some sort of, was it a roof assessment product? Tell us a little bit more about how you guys are looking at maybe disaster recovery. What does that look like for you guys?
So I think one thing I'll mention in general is that where we're really leaning in right now is our integrations and partnerships with the ecosystem in general. So we have a guy in our company named Boogie Tate, whom you may know, is running our partner management group. And we think it's really important. The ecosystem in the past has really run separately and kind of in silos where, it's like we just work with the insurance companies, or we just work with the roofers and contractors. We don't talk to each other and we don't really work together. Well, part of what is necessary now that there's all of this data and all of this consolidation of workflow is that all of the vendors have to step up and create a more robust ecosystem. And that robust ecosystem starts with being open to partnering with a bunch of people that you might not have partnered with in the past. How can we look at a situation, whether it's FEMA handling catastrophe claims as quickly as possible, or whether it's dealing with multiple hailstorms throughout the Midwest all at one time? How can we go and figure out ways to partner with a bunch of people to scale up for our customers, to work together, to pass that information? I mean, in the past, we would have thought that it was either a Nearmap or an ITEL app that would have to be the superhighway of everything. We wanted, we were the first app on most adjusters' phones at ITEL. And so we thought, well, let's bring everybody into that app. Well, a few years ago, it became clear that that's not the best strategy. The best strategy is our data needs to be in the right place at the right time in the workflow. And therefore, that means we need to stop pretending like we're going to be the beachhead of everything. Let's really lean into this ecosystem. And so I think that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest things we're focused on right now is how do we get our integrations? How do we get our data sharing in place and make sure that all of the security and appropriate workflow is in place so that we can make this seamless for the claims and underwriting process and get the right outcomes as quickly as possible.
That makes a ton of sense. You mentioned the app. I remember when the ITEL app came out. That's we went from stuffing shingles into envelopes to taking photos, and it was a foreign concept at the time. It was like, what do you mean I gotta go to this app and I gotta take these pictures and do this thing? What does Nearmap and the path forward, what do we think it looks like? I mean, is it claim system integration? Is it underwriting? Where do you think that might land?
From an integration perspective, you're asking?
Yeah, from an integration perspective. Where does that integration live? How do you get that data where it needs to go, when it needs to get there in the most effective way?
Well, it's an evolution for sure. It's a moving target. But what I'll say is the one thing I've learned, you guys know it too, especially the large carriers, but even the smaller carriers to a degree, every carrier does things differently. If you have a rigid system that doesn't adapt to different claim workflows and claim processes, you're pretty much dead. So I think the answer to your question is flexibility and breadth of partnership capabilities. So if you're looking at a claim and saying, all right, well, X% are going through the desk, so we need to have data solutions that are available at the fingertips of the desk adjuster, whether that's measurements or building material products or you name it, it needs to be served up in the, whether it's Guidewire or whether it's Verisk or Cotality, it needs to be served up in the right integration or data integration to get that to the right place at the right time. If we do need physical samples or we do need information, kind of ground truth data from the claim site, and there's a desk adjuster, how do we go integrate with the ladder assist companies? How do we go integrate with the water mitigation firms to get their data from on site so that we can use it in our process, right? How do we serve up something to a homeowner so that they might be able to give us information that we need to speed that up? So it's about the flexibility of not just looking at a broad, one size fits all solution. It's acknowledging that every type of claim, every peril, every state even can have a different way that particular claim is handled, and making sure that you have the right partnerships, integrations, and ecosystem development done ahead of time so that you can serve each customer's individual needs.
I know that you guys get a bunch of queries every day. I mean, I don't know what you call each individual order that comes in, but you get a lot of them. And
We do.
I have to ask, you have to be using AI on those because, I would think that a certain percentage of them, the AI can look at the picture and can say, this is XYZ shingle or this is XYZ carpet. That's tailor-made for an AI product.
It is. And we are to a degree, right? Now, there's always going to be a human in the loop. There's always going to be a subject matter expert that's looking at the data and the products. But I will say that if there's a way to help us be more efficient and continue to scale to the place that our customers need us to, that's where that not just AI, but technology has in general been kind of the where ITEL has always gone. We used to measure things with handheld micrometers, and now we use Fourier transfers to automatically figure out the stitching gauge of a carpet. So it's about that evolution. I will say that visual AI is kind of the last to really evolve. So, some AI still has trouble determining the difference between dog breeds. So trying to figure out the face weight of carpet or even the style of carpet. I mean, humans still argue about a twist brisé versus a textured Saxony carpet, right? So there's a lot of judgment that's still involved. But where we can make distinct decisions that are obvious from looking at photographs and speed up the process so that we can, instead of having to hire another 10 or 15 people next year, we can scale with the folks that we have to meet the future demands. That's certainly where we're heading.
Well, we just think that your business is absolutely fascinating, and it'll be very interesting to see how it evolves. How the very expensive bet that Nearmap took on with this. I always think when we have somebody like yourself on the program about my friend Dan Moore, who's a genius insurance executive, he'll always say, the person with the data wins. And that's what I think about when I think about what you guys are and what you've done.
That's something that Nearmap figured out early on, which is why they built the cameras and put them on planes and realized if you get that starting with that data, and now that's what they definitely still on Betterview and ITEL. So yes, I agree. It's a great strategy that they've implemented.
Yeah. So we thank you for being with us, and I hope that you'll come back in the future.
Yeah, sounds great. Enjoyed it. Nice to meet you guys, and happy to come back anytime.
A pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
He had a lot of interesting things to say. One of the things that stuck with me was that we're going to see more and more bigger members of the ecosystem buying smaller people in the ecosystem to create a more robust, competitive product set for the future. And, I think that's exactly what happened here is they went out and they bought some pieces to create something that's more formidable.
It will definitely be interesting to see as we move through this new AI world and technology world, who develops internally and who goes out and gobbles up other players to help fill their table. We're using an eating metaphor there.
Yes. We're very appreciative to Chris and the people at Nearmap in providing him for us today. Very interesting company. Thank you for being with us. We also thank our production staff. And of course, most importantly, we thank you for listening to us. And until next time, we will say what we always say, even though Lee Boyd isn't here. Okay, let's pause for a second so that it can fully sink in. Yeah, that's right. Goofing off again. Goodbye, everybody.